Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 18, 2020. And this is the regular meeting of the Sandpoint City Council. I now call to order. I am Mayor Shelby Ronstadt, presiding in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, council members Deb Rule, Joel Espiro, Kate McAllister, and Andy Grote are present here in chambers. Councilman John Darling is present and participating remotely. Great. Is he with us? Do you have that?
He is. His video is turned off, but he is present.
He is with us remotely. Okay. Councilwoman Shannon Sherman is absent this evening. We'll now rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from staff?
Yes, quickly, Mr. Mayor. We have a survey that's available online via our website as well as on our Facebook page, and it is on our Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Master Plan. So the first draft of that plan is up and available for people to review, and this is an opportunity to comment back and let us know whether we're hitting the mark, missing the mark, what are the priorities, and things that haven't been considered. So I encourage people to go online and take a look at the master plan. It's actually a pretty interesting read. It has a lot of history of Sandpoint in it, and so you can access that actually in the survey itself. And then it's only about 5 or 6 survey questions to fill out. So that will be open through next week.
Okay, that's a short window of time.
Yes.
Is there a way that we can extend that, or is that because of some?
We're up on a timeline to get the master plan submitted to the Historic Preservation Office. This ultimately doesn't come to council for review and final adoption decision until the first meeting in January. So there will be another draft. This is this round of survey will inform kind of a final draft, which goes on to our state historic preservation officer. So
Thank you. Okay, and is that it from staff?
yes.
Okay. Any announcements from council?
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I wanted to point out to everybody that Saturday, Governor put us back into stage 2. Sunday's paper, hospital moves into contingency mode. And gee, this morning when I got up, BGA collects record COVID number of tests. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody. I have some other stuff that I would like to read to you, so you'll have to bear with me. As far as from the desk of the governor, November 18th, 2020, Idaho National Guard called in to help hospitals as Idaho rolls back to modified stage 2. Healthcare leaders say they are weeks away from having to ration because too many healthcare workers are out sick with COVID-19. That means they will have to turn away from emergency departments, or they will be unable to provide the best care for patients with COVID-19, heart attacks, strokes, and other health issues. As in the governor's words, my latest executive order calls for 100 troops to provide a host of capabilities where they are needed, potentially including mobile testing support, medical facility decontamination, COVID-19 screenings, in addition to ongoing planning and logistics support. We also rolled Idaho back to a modified stage 2. Under the new statewide stage 2 public health order, gatherings of more than 10 people are prohibited. This does not pertain to religious or political expression. Physical distancing is required for all gatherings. At-risk Idahoans should self-isolate. All Idahoans are encouraged to telework whenever possible. Masks continue to be required at long-term care facilities. Bars, nightclubs, restaurants continue to operate with seating only. This does not mean Idaho's economy is in lockdown. Businesses and churches will remain open under the new statewide public health order. However, all individuals and businesses should continue to follow recommended protocols to minimize transmission, including wearing masks when around others not in your household. Those protocols are available at Rebound Go. Half of Idaho's population is under a local ordinance requiring masks, but we are seeing non-compliance with those local orders, or people are wearing their masks in public but then take them off in social settings where the virus is more likely to spread. Law enforcement cannot cite individuals for violating local ordinances, but law enforcement cannot be everywhere. I'm sorry, they can cite individuals, but they cannot be everywhere all the time. That is why I maintain this comes down to personal responsibility. Please wear a mask. This is all in bold print. Please wear a mask whenever you're around another person who is not in your household, so we can protect lives, preserve healthcare, access for all of us, and continue our economic rebound. Those were the governor's words. Me personally, I'm here in front of you today in our community as your councilwoman, as a member of this community, and as a living, breathing human life. I want you to know that I love and respect every last one of you, your families, your children, your parents, all of your loved ones. No matter your bias or your beliefs, we stand to gain more from the many things we have in common than from fighting about those which we do not. We may not share the same political views or religious views, but I will stop your toddler from running into the road and bring you flowers when a loved one passes. Why? Because we are all human and everyone deserves protection and compassion. It is evident that Idahoans love their liberty and freedom. It is up to all of us to be socially responsible, to do the right thing. People have proven that they are not socially responsible. They are not doing the right thing. I'm profoundly disappointed at the lack of leadership and social responsibility of this council. We need to be leaders. We need to set an example. Kellogg has and Coeur d'Alene has. We must not treat wearing a mask like a battle for the Super Bowl title. No team wins when life is lost. I ask you to look inside your heart today, step across to the other side. You may be ridiculed or harassed, but there is no I in team, and we will stand to gain more by being on the same team. I will not bore you with the science or the data. We are all aware the numbers are rising at an unprecedented rate. It is not my intention to shame anyone. We are all good people. But you must understand our regional hospitals are being overrun and our own city police force is being taxed by an outbreak. My heart is heavy and overburdened with the responsibility I harbor for the mental and physical well-being of our doctors, who will soon be facing the realities of emergency disaster medical care. When the resources are depleted, no beds or staff, and there is an inability to care for COVID and other patients, these doctors, some my personal friends who are already exhausted, will be the ones who will have to decide who lives or dies. Time to step into their shoes. I ask all of you, would you want to have to make that choice? Do you understand the personal, mental, and emotional trauma these healthcare workers will have to battle for the rest of their lives after making these decisions? The process of agendizing an emergency order for the mayor to institute a mask mandate on the agenda was futile, as no member of this council has approached me to say they would vote differently. The council president did not believe there would be a consensus to pass a mask mandate based upon her assumptions. The fear it will divide our community further, the rights, the lefts, or put more guns on the streets of downtown in protest. Let people carry their guns in protest. Let them argue about the reasons not to wear a mask, be they religious, political, or hygienic. I implore you, my fellow council members, to make the hard choice to be leaders. Sitting up here is not always easy. You will never make everyone happy. The right thing to do is not always the easiest thing to do. I'm not here to make people happy or repair their divisions. I'm here to protect our community, save lives, and keep people from dying. This isn't a game. You don't just take your ball and go home when you don't get your way. We all value life, and we should respect it. There have been 90 deaths, except I just pulled this up. There's actually been 94 deaths. I wrote this yesterday. In our health district since the beginning of the outbreak, 10 deaths, which is now actually 14 deaths since the beginning of November. And not 7 of those since our last council meeting, but now 11 of those since our last council meeting. These are just not numbers or data. They were human lives, people with families. I ask all of you who are participating in this meeting tonight to take a 5-minute moment of silence for these individuals that are no longer with us, so that we remember each one of these precious lives and the loss for their families. I only wish I could do more. Thank you. I would like to take that moment of silence. Please, if you could start a timer, Melissa.
Those are passionate words. I appreciate your comments tonight,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor. And I would like to join you in recognizing that 5 minutes of silence for those who have passed away in our community and in our nation and around the world from COVID in these last 7 months.
Mr. Mayor, how long would you like that moment of silence?
5 minutes?
5 minutes? Okay. 5 minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other announcements from council?
I just wanted to thank our street crews for moving the snow and the weeds and helping us out in town. So I appreciate them very much.
Me too. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I also want to add on to Councilwoman Rule's comments, just very briefly, and how close this home is for all of us and for us here at City Hall in particular. I'm not sure all of you were aware, or the public is aware, that we had 6 police officers that have been out, that were out last week due to COVID. That's a significant portion of our staff, and it affects our ability to maintain public safety in our community, and this is something obviously for us to take very seriously. Fortunately, 4 of those officers are back. We now have 2 that are out, but this is affecting our operations here at City Hall and our ability to maintain levels of service citywide. So I just want to reiterate how important of an issue this is, that we continue to do what we can within our power, within our authority to continue to stay on top of the issue and do what we can to address it. Okay, if there's nothing more from staff or council, we'll move on to the consent calendar. I'm sorry, to the public forum portion of this evening's meeting.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I believe you have a proclamation to read this evening.
Thank you. Got a little sidetracked there. I do have a proclamation to read. And this is recognizing lung cancer awareness. Whereas lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer death among men and women in the United States and in Idaho in 2020, accounting for more deaths than colon cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer combined. And whereas according to the Idaho State Cancer Registry, there were 194 new lung cancer cases between 2013 and 2017, and 146 deaths because of lung cancer between 2014 and 2018 in Bonner County. And whereas the 5-year survival rate for localized lung cancer is 59%, yet only 17% of lung cancers are diagnosed at this stage. And whereas screening for lung cancer for high-risk individuals using low-dose computed tomography can lead to the earlier detection of lung cancer and save lives, reducing the mortality rate by 20% when compared to screening by chest X-ray in the National Lung Screening Trial, and reducing the risk of death to 10 years by 24% in men and 33% in women, is demonstrated by another large randomized trial. And whereas funding for lung cancer research trials far behind funding for research of many other cancers, and additional research is needed in early diagnosis, screening, and treatment for lung cancer, as well as in lung cancer affecting women and lung cancer health disparities. And whereas women diagnosed with lung cancer are more likely to be younger and never smokers, lung cancer incidence and mortality rates in women are rising relative to men. More women die from lung cancer than breast cancer every year, and by 2035, it is expected that more women will die from lung cancer than men. And whereas organizations working in the Sandpoint community, such as the American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative and Women's Lung Cancer Forum, are committed to educating about lung cancer and lung cancer screening and working to increase lung cancer screening rates in Sandpoint. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Shelby Ronstadt, Mayor of Sandpoint, hereby declare November as Lung Cancer Awareness Month in Sandpoint, and recognize the need for research in lung cancer affecting women and lung cancer health disparities, and encourage all citizens to learn about lung cancer and early detection through lung cancer screening. Proclaimed this 18th day of November 2020 in the city of Sandpoint, Bonner County, Idaho. I'll We'll now proceed with the public forum portion of the meeting, which gives the public an opportunity to address the mayor and council regarding items listed on the consent calendar or on any topic not listed on the agenda. Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak during the public forum?
Mr. Mayor, everyone who's attending by Zoom this evening has signed up to speak during the public hearing. I'm not aware that they want to speak during the public forum, but I will ask if you are interested in speaking during the general public forum to please raise your hand. We do have a member of the public who would like to speak.
Okay. To accommodate those who wish to speak on general items during the public forum, as well as those who wish to speak on specific business items on our agenda, a total of 20 minutes will be dedicated to the public forum at the beginning of the meeting. If you'd like to speak and did not have an opportunity to do so, we will give everyone an opportunity to speak by reopening the public forum at the end of our regular agenda. In the interest of time, please do not repeat prior comments, but simply state your support for those comments. Comments shall not be personally derogatory, nor shall they be personally directed at any individual, organization, or business. Public participation is and will remain at the discretion of the mayor. We will be taking comments from City of Sandpoint residents first. Then we will hear from those who reside outside of our city limits. Please note that you will need a working microphone on your smartphone or computer in order to participate. When your name is called, you will see a prompt on your screen to unmute. You will need to press or click the unmute button in order to be heard. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. We will now begin with the first speaker. Clerk?
Rebecca Holland.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay. I was just listening in for the meeting tonight, but I was very, very moved by what Deb had to say and the moment of silence. I implore you to, as a council, step up for our community. This has been, it's just, it's heartbreaking. The governor has moved us back to stage 2. We know what's going on. Literally, if any of us have like a heart attack or a serious accident, it's going to be an issue at the hospital. I mean, you guys need to be the leaders that you were elected to be. And it's not socially responsible what's going on in this town. I'm appalled that I've been in other areas and I see how other people handle it. You can go in other progressive states, you go to the restaurant and you get your temperature taken. You sign in so that they can, if they need to, contact trace you later. They are being responsible and we are not. It's so clear in this town. And it's just, this has been going around and around and around, and I don't know why there's so many other things you want to deal with, but this is the health of our community. And I just implore you to please put it on the next agenda and make this happen. And it's noted. It's really being noted by many of us that in that very moment of silence, I looked up and I looked around your room, and I looked at those that are not in the room but are on the Zoom. And this is not a time to get more work done or show indifference. This is for real. So I'm sorry, I'm feeling very emotional at this moment because it is the life and death for many, and we don't want to lose any more. And I don't want to see any of you go, and I don't want to see any of my family go or friends. So please consider moving forward and doing the right thing as leaders for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holland, for your words. Clerk, do we have anyone else?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that will conclude the public forum portion of this evening's meeting. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. For the record, the total amount of bills is $1,477,684.37. reflecting $573,856.06 for regular payables and $903,828.31 for payroll. Are there any items council wishes to remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion that the consent calendar be approved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Darling?
Can't hear you, John. You're muted. He gives us a thumbs up. That's a
Okay.
yes.
Councilwoman McAllister?
Yes.
Councilman Espero?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule?
Yes.
Councilman Groot?
Yes.
Motion passes. The first item under old business is a COVID-19 update from Jennifer Stapleton, our city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Briefly, the Attorney General's office, there was a request from several cities around the state, and the Municipal Attorneys Association met today discussing the rollback by the governor and limitations under the modified stage 2. There was a question that several of the cities had regarding the 10 people rule and whether that applied to government business meetings. And the answer from the Attorney General's office was that it does apply to these meetings. And that is why we're limited with where we are tonight. We have 10 people in the room tonight. And we continue to offer public participation through electronic participation on Zoom as well as by telephone. We will continue to offer for those who are coming in specifically to present on an item when possible to participate in person when they choose to do so. But we are limited in terms of public participation in the room at this time. I want to note there was an article today in the Bonner Bee regarding staffing reductions at Bonner County, and we had some questions here at the city relative to our policies and what we're doing about staffing at the city. Council members will recall that in the spring we did have staff go home and work remotely when we were on a full shutdown. At this point in time, even at this modified stage 2, we don't have an across-the-board reduction to staffing in the office. Our public service is better actually when we're here at the facilities. We do have policies, as we've discussed under our past updates around if staff members are sick, if staff members are exposed to COVID through household exposure, if they have a diagnosis or symptoms of COVID themselves. So we have had a strict protocol in place for months now relative to our employees, and fortunately it's worked well in keeping most of our workforce healthy, safe, and able to be here. Under our CARES Act dollars this week, we did order a number of air purifiers to be throughout City Hall. We'll have those come in the next couple of weeks, including one here in council chambers. So where we have areas where people are meeting, we've got that, and it's again a recommended best practice for the safety and health of employees. So we also have had for months a very strict protocol where we've limited our public areas inside City Hall separate from our staff work areas. And we continue to maintain that and appreciate the understanding of the public that comes in and has been used to one way of doing business in the past, where they would go upstairs, for example, for planning and building issues or engineering issues. They're downstairs on other issues, and all of our public service now is here in the reception area or in our meeting rooms. So we're not doing any meetings with the public in our staff work areas, again, in an effort to keep our staff safe and healthy and here at work. So that's what I have for an update, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this issue? Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anyone, any questions or any comments from council? Okay. Moving on. The next item under old business is a public hearing and decision on a proposed property exchange at City Beach. On October 21st, 2020, upon approval of Resolution 20-052, Declaration of Value of Property, City Council declared their intent to exchange 1.53 acres of city-owned real property valued at $2,066,000 adjacent to the hotel at City Beach Park for 1.89 acres of privately owned parking and marina property on the west end of City Beach Park, valued at $2,090,000, to include approximately 130 lineal feet of shoreline that will be publicly owned and accessible in perpetuity. A public hearing was scheduled for this meeting with the notice of public hearing published on October 27th, 2020 in the Bonner County Daily Bee, the city's newspaper of record. At this time, I will ask that council members disclose any conflicts of interest or ex parte contact regarding this issue. Are there any declarations that council feels need to be made? Seeing none, the following will be the order and procedure of the public hearing. First, presentation by city staff and representatives of Sand Ida Allen G. Cox Family, LLC, and Trinity at City Beach Global Restaurant Solutions, LLC. Second, opening of the public hearing, at which time the public may provide testimony. Council may ask questions of those testifying at that time. Those who wish to testify are required to state their name and whether they reside in Sandpoint city limits. We will call upon City of Sandpoint residents first and then hear from those who live outside of our city limits second. The order for those providing testimony will be as follows. Those in favor will speak first, those neutral to the proposal will be second, and those opposed will be third. And then the third order procedure is final questions may be asked of city staff and the private property representatives at that time. Fourth, closing the public hearing. 5, council deliberates. No new information may be provided at that time, and questions may be directed only to city staff during deliberation. So everybody's clear on that? City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will start us off with the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much of this presentation we have covered in our previous meetings, and we also provided supporting documentation and materials in our packet. But I'd like to start out first by handing this over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Kim Woodruff, for some opening remarks and to bring us back to the properties that we have in question. Then I'll switch over to the next slide to Kim in just a minute, which also shows the design for City Beach.
Great. Thank you. I'm extremely excited for your consideration tonight. That is, in my professional and personal opinion, a real win-win for our property trade for our city. I've been here for a long time and I've seen a lot of cool projects and been involved in a lot of cool projects as far as building parks, the Windbag Marina, skate park, other things. This to me is times 10 on that as far as a game changer for our community and positioning ourselves for the future, the next 50 to 100 years to maximize this facility. It does add 0.36 acres to the park. It adds additional linear feet of waterfront. It benefits our citizens, our visitors, and our economy. And when I first heard about the concept, and I shared this last time, it's like it took a while to really absorb it. And then the more you looked at it, consider it, and what we can do to be able to protect our passive family recreational opportunities, maximize our boating access, which is as our community continues to grow, both visitors and locals, it's very, very limited to where we can have access to the water on boat ramps. And for the city, we have here in Lakeview Park, but then, other than going over to the Hope area or across the river to a few, it's really difficult for folks to launch their boats. And that's the boating is a very important and fun part of the living here. It also provides a much safer access to the water, removing and separating the boat access to that one end of the park, and then freeing up the center of the park for maybe some activities that would bring people into our downtown and support our economy. So
I truly do and look at this as a win-win. Some people, I think I've heard said, well, this is just something that's going to benefit just maybe the Edgewater of the business. But you know what? When the city benefit when our businesses succeed, and maybe giving us opportunities to support our shoulder seasons with some of the meetings and so I'm really excited with this opportunity to go forward, and I'm really excited.
Thanks, Jim.
We included in our packet tonight for council and the public some documents related to feasibility study that we undertook as city staff and looking at the viability of this. As Kim mentioned, initially this concept came in again as part of our planning through the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And it was about maximizing our parks and recreation resources, providing the public with access to the water, and offering through all of our parks areas as many parks amenities and as many use types as possible in the parks. So this came through as an initial concept through our Parks and Recreation consultants through Greenplay. But it was a concept and it hadn't fully been vetted. And there were a number of questions that came up rightly so from the public as well as the council related to the feasibility of this. And so as we move through with adoption of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we also undertook a deep dive into some of the questions that were asked. One of those was an environmental assessment of the site, where currently it's an RV park and it is owned and managed by Sandida and the Cox family. And so we engaged All West Engineering to conduct a phase 1 environmental assessment. So we didn't get ourselves into potentially a situation where we have property that needs to be cleaned up, particularly because of its location near the railroad tracks. I did include the report that was issued by All West and would note again for the council that there were no findings as a part of this environmental assessment. We also had a traffic review conducted by our current traffic consultants, Fair and Piers. They're working with us on our multimodal transportation plan. And there were some questions that were raised regarding the access into the proposed boat launch parking area, the ability to navigate through that parking area with vehicles and trailers. There was concern then with the entrance into that, and then what is currently the entrance into the parking way for the hotel as well as the Railroad Avenue. We did receive some comments back from Fair and Piers regarding improvements that could be made to the concept, but overall, they did not have any significant findings with the overall design that would make the design infeasible. We have some suggestions on some improvements that could be made in terms of access, again, into particularly the hotel parking area. And that would be something that we would be working with the Cox family and Sandida on as they move through their development plan for the hotel. And that's typically part of our pre-review process. So we would be looking to incorporate some of those improvements there. And Adrian and I've had a brief conversation that there are some suggestions and they were open to hearing those suggestions. Another point.
Can I ask you a question about that? Can you respond to any of the suggestions with regard to access and egress into the boat launch?
I'm going to hand it over to Amanda actually for that. So as I noted, Amanda, our infrastructure development services manager, she's electronic tonight and she's the one who worked directly with Fair and Piers.
Amanda, are you with us?
I am. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Did you hear
regarding access into the parking area adjacent to the proposed boat launch location, we took a look at that with Fair and Piers, our traffic engineers, and there are suggestions for further refinement, particularly around the width of the approach into the parking lot, and making sure that we can provide some adequate turn radiuses there. That level of detail is really associated as we continue with the progression of the design process. So as Jennifer mentioned, they were confident that a solution that would provide adequate access was viable given the space at that location. They also made a suggestion, which I think is consistent with the initial intent of the concept, of reallocating and moving some of the spaces within that parking lot to ensure boat trailer accessibility, not only for launching, but just being able to park and exit as well. And so fundamentally, they favored the idea of squaring up that access with the adjacent access to the west with the hotel. And also noted that it would be important to really take a close look at the crosswalk locations. Again, all of those details to be further vetted as the design progresses.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that.
Another topic related to this, which isn't specifically traffic, but it really is parking, and there's been much conversation about the availability of parking, concerns about parking down at City Beach, particularly as we're looking at boats and trailers and increased usage on that front. And Chief Kuhn is available tonight too to kind of give some perspective, since it's our police force and our community resource officers really that are under Chief Kuhn's oversight, who deal with the traffic concerns. And I think this year we've already started to see an uptick in tourism. We saw this year, in addition, the development that we're seeing in the community with new housing developments, both within city limits as well as development outside city limits, is significant. For us at the city, just in our planning and building permits moving through currently, we have over 700 unit permits that we are in the process of processing, from development to in final stages or have recently been approved. So we are looking at, just based on the development that we have been processing in the last 12 months, at 700 plus units. The Census Bureau estimates it's 2.3 people per unit or household coming in. So that's what type of population growth we're looking at within city limits. The county is, in meetings with the county, has told us they've issued over 1,000 building permits, site permits in the unincorporated county as well since the beginning of the year. So we're looking at that volume of influx of population coming in, which will place further demand on parking, boat and trailer parking. And so I want to hand it over to Chief Kuhn to talk a little bit about both what our experience with the boats and trailers and our regular passenger vehicle parking, and then what we were seeing even into this fall season this year.
Chief, you're muted. There you go.
I should be unmuted now, hopefully.
We can hear you fine, thanks.
It's in person. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Just to touch on a couple of things going through this process and review. One of the biggest complaints that we heard probably this summer from our citizens and our guests is the lack of parking at our beach and the lack of flow. And we started talking about our lack of flow. If you've ever been down there in the summertime, we have boats that are trying to launch. We have cars that are trying to get through I call it a roundabout there at the end of the beach. Families trying to park, walk across it. So with all those issues, looking at this design and looking at issues of like our parking, our backing up, or oversized vehicles, we only have, and Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, probably 14 dedicated boat parking spots at the beach. Those are the ones that are assigned strictly for boats, RV, and trailers. If you've ever been down there, you know that we allow boat parking to extend down into those angle parking, but you also notice if you've been down there in the summer, a lot of those that drive don't follow those guidelines and they park kind of however they want, and they'll take up 3 and 4 spots. So giving the boaters an area by themselves to be able to park and be able to maintain that area of safety is, I think, is important. One of the other issues we have too is you'll see people park down there. We've seen a huge increase of like kayaks, paddle boards, and where do they park, where do they launch? A lot of those issues back up that day-to-day traffic flow of our beach. So with getting a separate area, as Kim mentioned, for our boats, being able to launch, to be able to clean out their stuff is important. The beach slowed down this summer from the beginning up until just a short time ago. It seems like our beach was fairly busy. One of the complaints that we hear too is, you know, that we're a walking town and we love to walk a certain distance, but families don't like to park downtown and walk to the beach. They want to be able to drive to that beach, be able to find a safe spot to park and be able to go in there. So the design that we have laid out, I like, because it's going to eliminate a lot of those concerns that we see from our parking problems with our oversized loads, our boats, even people that park on the grass because we have limited parking in that area. What else did I miss?
I think you got it, Chief, unless there's any additional questions at the end.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you. I included in your packet tonight a letter from BNSF committed to releasing the development restriction that is on our property, and that was another point of concern and a feasibility point that we needed to work ourselves through to determine whether this property exchange would be viable. So the City Beach property was actually given to the city of Sandpoint by the railroad really back in the early 1900s. And when it was given to us, there was a deed restriction that came with that restricted the use of that property to a park use only. And in the event that we were not using any portion of it or all of it for a park, then ownership reverted back to the railroad. And that applied to the whole portion of the beach that is owned by the city of Sandpoint, including the area that is right next to the Best Western Edgewater Hotel, the grassy area that we're talking about exchanging. We did get a release from the railroad some years ago that allowed for portions of that area to be used for commercial purposes. And again, you can see on there where the pool is for the hotel, as well as the deck for Trinity and some of that use for event areas. So we specifically had a release on that deed restriction for that. But the railroad ultimately, when we contacted them over whether we could get a deed restriction released on this in order to make this trade viable, the railroad was very much in favor of that concept, because actually their area of greatest concern around development is the area that is currently owned by the Cox family, the RV park property that is adjacent to the tracks. What the railroad would not want to see is any development there next to the tracks. So they did send us a letter indicating that if council were to approve this property exchange, that they would release the deed restriction on the grassy area that the city owns adjacent to the hotel, in exchange for putting a deed restriction on the property that the city would acquire from the Cox family. You will note that the letter that you have in your packet, it didn't have a signature on it. We added a letter today. Melissa uploaded it to the packet where we got the signed letter from the director of real estate with BNSF just today. So what I had included in the packet was their letter that they sent to me saying, is this okay, while we're getting you the letter before today? And the letter before tonight's hearing arrived literally hours before tonight's hearing. So, but the content is the same, and we have the appropriate signatures on that letter. Finally, there had been questions regarding the boat parking area as well as the marina and boat launch as proposed in the conceptual design, and concerns that could it be constructed in such a way, could dredging occur, removal of soil occur so that the launch could be deep enough for sailboats. And there was a concern relative to turning movements and queuing movements of boats coming in and out of the marina, particularly with that entrance going into Sand Creek. Again, what we had initially with this parks design concept, that is what it is. It's a design concept. And as you move forward with construction, what you do is you take it through engineering and actually get an engineered design from an engineering firm and move forward. So you see changes on concepts when you move through that process. And we saw that with War Memorial Field from the design concept, and then some of the tweaking that came along as it went through the engineering process and changes therein. We contacted Transpac Marinas, who is an engineering firm, engineering and marina construction firm, actually, that's what they specialize in, is marine construction and engineering. And we discussed the concept with them. They took a look at the queuing, they took a look at the access points with the concepts, they took a look at the marina design and said it was all doable, it was all viable, it can be constructed, and it could effectively work. But they asked to move into a next phase and give us kind of a more vetted design, really a preliminary engineering design, taking into consideration those issues and looking at ways that improvements could be achieved. They provided us with this revised preliminary engineering design, which shows some better queuing at the boat launch itself, some realignment from the design concept that was proposed for the boat moorage, and includes actually more moorage than what was proposed. So this concept includes 70 spots for boats. But I think what becomes really important when you look at the boat launch itself, and you can see where they're showing floats on either side of it. It's designed in such a way to provide that queuing or that stacking for both coming in and going out that we currently don't have at the boat launch. Right now it can become, particularly when the boat launch is busy, a guessing game of is somebody coming, is somebody going? And we're also seeing the cars, the boats looking to either load, or the cars, trucks looking to load or unload. We're seeing them queued through our parking lot, also limiting parking at City Beach, and sometimes blocking our ADA parking there as well while they're waiting to queue. The results of their review also indicated that there wasn't a concern with blocking access and ingress and egress out of Sand Creek there, under the byway and the what will be 2 BNSF bridges. So, and you can see the bridges reflected on this design. There was some question, particularly with construction of the new bridge. Would that make this boat launch viable or not viable? And the bridge construction itself doesn't have any impact on the boat launch's viability at that particular location. Did I miss anything, Kim?
No, that's great. The one thing I might note is that the actual design has changed. Almost cuts in half your maintenance, because the main walkway is in the water and you've got slips on either side. So I thought that was really an excellent catch. And then also point out that I did reach out to Fish and Game, DEQ, and then the regulatory agencies, primary regulatory agencies, the Army Corps and Department of Lands, about the possibility of the excavation to gain some depth there. And it was very positive. And then the cool thing is they're all public agencies, right? And so they really take into account the public benefit. So that was a real plus. And it's some of the question, well, can you guarantee? Well, we don't own the property and we can't formally apply yet. But we did, I feel very, very positive of, 95 plus, that it's very, very doable. So I'm excited about it.
Kim, could you explain that point? I'm not sure I followed you on, you said there were the maintenance on this.
Yeah, okay, so right
Do you
now.
want me to go back to the first concept?
Sure. See where the boardwalk is on the shore?
Mhm.
And so you've got that whole boardwalk of main dock, right? And then you have finger docks. So the main ones are where you walk to the fingers to get out to your boat. And then how it kind of used around. So you've got all that main dock. When you go to the new design, you'll see just one.
Right.
With more slips.
Right.
And so that's where, and that's, similar to what we've done at the Windbag, and we've actually used the jetty as our main dock, and then we come off with fingers with doubles on both sides. So and also the construction, when we look at the construction here, it'll be my recommendation that you can invest now, and we right now at the Windbag, we've got the concrete decking with the steel truss and the floats that are minimal maintenance, a little bit more upfront, but way long-term, it's a better economy. And so, and again, this kind of positions us too, for possible expansion from the end. That's kind of on the very end is what kind of where maybe the tour boat might be, because we have the one tour boat down there, right? But we could, the possibility of extending that out there. So that's the one thing, our demand far exceeds our supply of slips.
Okay, thank you.
A particular note in this design compared with the first design too, and there was quite a bit of discussion with this with the marine engineers, was that the demand for larger slips, larger boats, as I'm sure most of us have seen out in the water, it's only increasing. So, and even through reservations through the Parks Department, Cami confirms that it's more and more demand for the larger slips. So this particular design has slips that are 28 foot to 48 foot, as opposed to right now, our inventory down at the City Beach Marina is primarily around 20 foot, 20 smaller 20, 24 foot slips. So this accommodates what is the growing and future demand for boat types, and could be constructed with putting this in at that time. With that, I want to hand it over first to Adrian to talk a little bit, because there's the piece of how this fits with our parks plan and our design there. But obviously there's a lot of public interest and public benefit to be gained too on what happens on the private side of things. So I want to turn it over to Adrian and then Justin to talk about that particular side of the story.
The number one thing I want to talk about is the vision with or without the land trade with the swap. We're far enough into design and concept and planning to have pretty well thought out what each variant would look like with and without the swap. So as if we were to swap with the city and acquire the lawn, this is a very good example of what the design would look like. We're still very much tweaking the exterior look. This is only 4 stories. There's a good chance we could end up being 5 stories and see that footprint shrink a little bit. That's my strong preference, and also to go with more mass timber framing. So we're working with Riley Creek Lumber Mill on that and some things, but this is roughly the concept that we're looking at. All variants so far look very similar to this, other than maybe a shrinking footprint. The alternative is that we would stick to our own property. Mostly everything that you see as parking lot there, we would stick to that, and we would build a limited service hotel, meaning no restaurant. We just don't have room. So it's only economically viable to tear down and replace if we can basically double our number of rooms. We only have 53 now, so to go at least to 100 is required to make it economically viable. We wouldn't have enough room on our own property to have a restaurant. Now, we had talked about the possibility of the restaurant being in the RV park, but that's not really economically viable for a restaurant operator. So our expectation is if there's no swap, we would have like a Hampton Inn, a limited service Hampton Inn on our own property, and that over in the RV park, in the long run, that would end up being condos. That's the highest and best use of that if we were to retain that property. So you can really see the difference is a little bit larger hotel with restaurant as opposed to condos and limited service hotel. And also the nature of the hotel, if we were to do the swap, changes a fair amount. The cost of construction for the vision after the swap is at least 50% more investment. The restaurant costs a lot, and we would also make the hotel as a full service hotel a little higher end. It also allows, instead of just being something like a Hampton Inn, where they have very strict guidelines that you will look like a Hampton and act like a Hampton and do exactly what we say, we would go with a boutique hotel line, probably Hilton's Tapestry collection. And that gives us a massive freedom to design the hotel to look like what we want, and what they really desire is that it be a design that fits with your local character, local flavor. So we gain that benefit of being able to make the hotel a little higher end and fit local character. So that's really my talk about what would happen if we didn't do a swap. And we're pretty confident about those two different designs. The other is just briefly to talk about the benefits. I think they're fairly clear, but you know, the significantly more money that we would spend translates into jobs in construction, property taxes, a little higher bed tax revenue, impact fees, things like that. Certainly the restaurant brings a lot of impact, or a lot of benefits too. And I think that it's important for me to point out, or the city to realize the financial benefits of this project, because personally, I think that the ability for the city to move forward with its long-term vision of the city beach is greatly aided, is dramatically pushed forward by the swap. Without the swap, the city misses out on these different revenue items I've mentioned, but post-swap, they also will have short-term RV park revenue, much higher or higher moorage revenue. There will be significant value in the expanded boat launch. There'll be all the parking has real value that the city might have to replace or come up with an expensive option to do otherwise. So I personally feel like there's real benefit in terms of massively changing this time frame in which the city can move forward its long-term vision there. Certainly, of course, I'm biased, but I think that this hotel would be dramatically better for local residents in terms of a place to come, a place for friends and family to visit, and have the restaurant with expanded decks and a nice new facility to be able to go down and eat and enjoy. I think it's a very common, popular destination for residents, and is oddly as it sounds, a nice public benefit. And we certainly will not have a restaurant on site without the swap. And I'll let Justin talk about his perspective on that, but happy for questions as we get to it later.
Thank you.
Justin Dick, I own Trinity at City Beach. I'm probably in the weirdest position in terms of being up here right now, as I own no real estate down there. I opened my restaurant on May 9th of 2009. 11 and a half years later, we're at 1,267 employees that we've hired in this community. We have over $11.5 million in that amount of time that's gone into payroll and gratuities. 99% of my employees are Bonnier County residents and live within this area. And that money stays within this area in terms of shopping, in terms of their landlords, their houses, their purchases, all stays in that area. With that said, it's been an interesting journey. I never thought that I'd be at this position right now, fighting for my life in a restaurant in this type of a setting. Certainly restaurants have their challenges. Most of them fail in the first 3 years. We made it through that point. The rest of them fail in the next 2 years after that by year 5, and we made it through that point. To have such an incredible restaurant at such an incredible location with the staff that we do, we have very low turnover. My longest tenured employee has been with me for 12 years now. And my second longest tenured staff is 11 and a half years. Okay? That doesn't typically happen in our industry. We've been stewards of City Beach. We've been stewards of this community. We've worked with almost every single nonprofit in this area and partnered with them somehow, some way, whether it's in-kind donations, whether it's cash donations, whether it's to use that grass out in front of the restaurant and the hotel. Okay? We've heard from many people that they didn't know that that grass was available to them as the public. I would argue that without Trinity, much of the public wouldn't have been able to use that grass without the events that we put on for these nonprofits. We've been able to grow every single year. At this point, pre-COVID last year, we had 117 employees on staff, breakfast, lunch, and dinner open 364 days a year with the exception of Christmas Day. We do not shut down. I do not move to Tucson, Arizona, or anywhere warm when the business gets slow and spend the tourist dollars and the local dollars in another community that has not earned those dollars. We stay open. We take the brunt of the shoulder seasons. One of the big things that we've been arguing about, I can safely say that I've spent more time at City Beach than anyone in this community in the last 11 and a half years. I understand how the beach works. I understand what the impact is, whether it's from the pedestrians that bike down there, skateboard down there, walk there, drive there, bring their boats down there. And one of my biggest problems that I've had to deal with over the course of the last decade is why we use the city's most valuable asset for only 3 months out of the year. And those are the summer months, okay? There's never been a time than right now do we understand the socioeconomic barriers that stop our locals in our community from being able to ski and get a season pass. As much as we love Schweitzer and their wonderful community partners, okay, the beach offers a very affordable way for our locals to have a good time. Okay? Boat recreation is an expensive process, you know, from winterizing it to maintenance to getting a boat to buying a vehicle big enough to pull the boat around the trailer, finding parking for it, finding moorage for it, and paying for slips. Okay? That beach in that area offers the majority in our community that can't afford to recreate on that lake with their boats, the opportunity to be near that lake. Okay? Where we have failed is we have not given our locals an opportunity to use that asset outside of those summer months. Okay? We have a beautiful parking lot down there. We have an opportunity to bring concerts, to bring nonprofits, to bring, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up, if you can see in that grassy area. The one issue that we've had at Trinity here with hosting the dozen nonprofit events that we do, we typically top out somewhere between 500 and 700 people in that grass. We have always worked with Adrian, Kim Woodruff, Corey Cooner, whoever the chief of police is, and the fire chief, every time we have an event that encroaches on the city property, okay? We've always cleaned that area up. We've always taken care of it. We've always made sure that alcohol does not go wandering off that property. And we always take parking into consideration. Most of our events, we figured out how to bus people down to the event, get them there, pick them up, take them back to the free parking in town, okay? And we've done that in conjunction with the city, the fire chief, and the chief of police, and Adrian over here as well too. What we have not done is brought this community something that they can use during our off season, okay? Which is the toughest as a small business owner. It's tough. It's very, very tough to make it through here. November is our toughest month right now. It's getting even tougher with COVID. We need to have realistic, affordable options of entertainment for our community to help the downtown corridor, those businesses and those restaurants. I can tell you right now, as a restaurant, it is hard to do business in November. The ski mountain's not open up yet. The water's already pulled back. It's muddy down at the beach. You have no reason to go down to the beach unless we give them a reason to go down to the beach. It's been 2 long years of working with Kim Woodruff and working with Jennifer Stapleton and the staff and Adrian as well to come to some sort of a plan where we could potentially keep our restaurant, move a lot of our nonprofit activity over into that grassy spot right there. Now, it's a loss of revenue for us to give up every one of those nonprofit events that we do. But with that said, we gain the opportunity to bring the rest of the town businesses in. And one of the big knocks on us has been, well, Trinity gets to do it because of their proximity. So they get the food and beverage service money that comes off of all these different events. With this proposal right here, we can move those same events over to that grassy area there and ask participation from the entire Sandpoint business community, restaurants, food and beverage, to come down there and to put, potentially, is everyone familiar with Festival Row, a big group of food and beverage services, to be able to do that same thing down here. And not only do it during the summer, but do it year round to bring some business, to bring some vibrancy to this beautiful downtown corridor that we spend so much money and so much time changing our roads, the bump outs, making sure that it is safe for pedestrians, bicycles, anybody, and keep our moniker of the walking community. Not only can we help by moving these nonprofit events over here, what we've seen is the financial impact of these nonprofit events. You take the Chafe 150, for example. Roughly 700 people participated on the last go round of the Chafe 150. Their event is growing. People flock from all over the United States and Canada to come to these events because of, our geographical features that we have and this beautiful beach and the ability to start and finish a public event on this beach right here. The other large thing, I sit on the Tourism Council as well, and something we've discussed ad nauseum for the last 5-6 years is having access to a conference room or some sort of a facility that holds over 300 people. Geographically, where Sandpoint is, we've got a lot of filters around us from Coeur d'Alene in Canada, Spokane, Montana, that stop a lot of businesses from holding their big conferences here in our community. We've seen with Coachella and their mobile summit that typically happens in February, they bring roughly 150 industry folks from all over the community. Okay? They need to use the Tango Cafe and the Columbia State Bank building. They need to use conference rooms down at the Best Western. They need to use conference rooms at the Lodge. They need to use conference rooms over on the north side of town in Ponderay as well too. The ability to have a conference room on site that can hold 300 people has the ability to make the town busy during the times when we need it most. Okay? Many of those conferences happen during the shoulder season periods of time that this entire community could use that business. Right? It's not Trinity that's going to absorb all of that conference business. We may be able to get a breakfast service, a lunch service, a dinner service out of it for one particular part of those meetings. But the reality is when Coachella brings the mobile summit here and when they're done with their meetings, that 150 people marches out across this community and spends those outside dollars with our community that stay with our local business ownership and stay with our local employees that get spent here locally in this economy. Okay? The ability to have large events year-round at City Beach, as well as a conference room, regardless of whether Trinity is even in the picture in the new iteration of how this ever turns out, we need the conference room. We need to be able to host these groups for our community to make it more than just the 3 big warm months out of the year. We need to have the ability to use the city's largest asset that it has more than 3 months out of the year. And this plan proposes to be able to do both.
Great, thank you.
With that, as the mayor covered it in the beginning of this agenda item, We did have an appraisal done on both properties. It was done by Ed Morris of Morris and Company out of Hayden. The appraisal report was completed March 24th of this year. The value for the city-owned property being considered and recommended for this exchange was $2,066,000. The appraised value of the property that the city would gain through the exchange from the Cox family was appraised at $2,090,000. Important timelines to consider with this again. The reason that this is before you now is we have a number of timelines, but they're a year plus out. But before we can move forward with any planning on the city side or on the private side, a decision as to ownership of the property must be made. We are already working with funders to put in applications for funding of the boat launch, the marina and parking lot area in the 2022 grant cycle. As Adrian mentioned, upon acquisition of the property, currently the property has been configured and has functioned as an RV park, which is sold out nearly all the time that the spaces are available. We've done a feasibility assessment relative to that RV park and believe that consistent with what the history of that park is, that the city could benefit by nearly $100,000 in revenue per year. That starts to provide us the seed money, the necessary match money in order to leverage these outside grants. The timeline for the hotel teardown is just after Labor Day of 2021. And again, with moving forward with final design and engineering and all of the planning that needs to go back and forth between the engineer, the architect, the property owner, and the city, it will take us nearly a year to get through all of that. And they are on a timeline to tear down the hotel right after Labor Day of next year, and then to be looking at a reopening for both the hotel and restaurant in the spring of 2023. Consistent with our other parks and recreation master plans, we have a plan that we don't have full funding for the plan, but without the vision, we're not able to leverage the dollars to raise the donations or get the community support for not what we have, but what we could have in the future. And so laying this out, acquiring the property, and so that we are now set where we can move forward enables that to happen for the city. With that, Mr. Mayor, that is our initial presentation.
Great, thank you all for that presentation. Does council have any questions?
Justin, that was great. Good job. While it's getting torn down, is there a plan for Trinity to exist in that in-between time between tear down and reopening?
Yeah, we're currently, we were slated to move into the Truby's building prior to the end of July of this year, when we found out that the building tear down was going to move into 2021. Basically, the outcome of this tonight will determine where we're at with that building and whether we're going after another building after that. But we do intend to maintain open for roughly 2 years at a separate location for the brand recognition, to keep the employees all employed before we move back to this location.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Okay. For those participating on Zoom, please note that you will need a working microphone on your phone or computer to speak. When your name is called, and by the way, I'm now opening the public hearing. When your name is called, you will see a prompt on your screen asking whether you would like to unmute. Then you will need to unmute yourself in order to be heard, and each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes. Clerk, is there anyone signed up who would like to testify in favor?
Mr. Mayor, we did have someone sign up who wanted to testify in favor, a city resident, Clay Hutchison.
Okay. Mr. Hutchison?
Yes, good evening. Is my mic on?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Yes, thank you. Clay Hutchison, I live in town. And though I participated in some of the master planning forums and workshops, on this one, I am just an observer as a citizen. And I first think some major kudos need to be given to everyone who's worked on this. When I first heard about this plan idea, as a developer, I gave it about a 0% chance of coming to fruition. This is a complicated swap, lots of moving parts, lots of different agendas, and kudos to the perseverance and the talent that worked on this, both obviously Jennifer and her staff and Kim, but also the Cox family and everyone involved in it. This is a great example of a public-private partnership, and I really think it's created a win-win for both entities. The presentation you guys all just gave was very informative, very detailed, and I think highlights the win-win on all that. This has created a lot of buzz around town. This has not been done in a vacuum, and a couple of the things that I've heard that have been kind of in opposition of it concern me for what I felt was kind of a lack of vision in those opposing comments. One is giving up the grass in front of the park, and yes, it's always a shame to give up grass, but I think it's important to reiterate that this is a recreational park. This is not a wilderness area. It's not a nature preserve. It's a recreational park. And when you have recreational amenities, you've got to balance out the functional aspects that go along with that. And there are others that would say, why do we need more parking when the parking issues are only a handful of days over the course of a year? And though statistically maybe there is some validity to that, the reality is those summer weeks, those 14 weekends, are the most important recreational days of the year for a great number of people in this community. And the city would be remiss if they didn't solve what is a real problem during that active time. And this swap really helps to do that. There are others that say, look, we need more detail before thinking this is a good idea, especially relative to the boat launch, which is going to take a lot of work to get all those agencies that Kim mentioned together on working on this. I think they're going to meet their match in Jennifer and Kim when they come in and need to do that. So, that is going to happen. I can't say for sure, but even if for some reason that doesn't happen, this land swap is a good benefit to the park because it does realign those parcels into the way that they're perceived and the way that they'll be used. Most people view that lawn in front of the hotel as part of the front lawn of the hotel, and it's not really a very utilized resource.
Mr. Mayor, that is 3 minutes.
Mr. Hutchinson, that's 3 minutes. Thank you for those comments. Those are really helpful. Do we have anyone else, clerk, that has signed up in favor of the proposal?
No, Mr. Mayor, not in favor.
Do we have anyone signed up who would like to testify that is neutral?
We did have someone sign up who wanted to testify who is neutral. Rebecca Holland.
Rebecca, are you there?
Yes. Hi. I have brought it up before in another meeting on a land swap that we have an ordinance that requires that there be bicycle parking incorporated into these designs. And again, I see nothing in this one. It's an ordinance that was passed that's a 15-to-1 ratio. And this is important for the locals of the area to be able to get down there. And obviously, if more people ride by bike, they're going to have more automobile parking available or vehicle parking available. There is, we've talked about this for years. I was a member of the Bike Ped Committee, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, for 7 years. And this has always been a goal to address this. And I'm just kind of wanted to bring it up again, that I'm not hearing anyone other than Justin mention people like to bike down there, and we know we do, that this needs to be incorporated into the plan. throughout the beach, but in particular with what we're talking about. A lot of us will ride our bikes down and meet up with a friend that has a boat and take off for the day with them. So it's not just vehicle parking and trailer parking and all of these things. This, again, just have to keep saying, this is an ordinance, so I don't know why this is missed in a plan of this nature. So if you could bring it to the engineer's attention to incorporate that in, I think that's very important. And I just want to mention too, I thought it was pretty interesting looking at the new design for the restaurant or hotel. And again, there, I think in the time that I was sitting looking at the design, there was well over 100 places for cars to park. But again, there's no space for bikes. And the designated space is like 3 foot width per bike. So when you look at the ratio, that's, you're looking at 30 foot. That's not just something tucked away in a corner. And there's all other kind of little provisions, as you may well know, to look into, that it have lighting and a safe place for people to actually lock up their bikes. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holland. I appreciate those comments. Clerk, anyone else signed up for neutral?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anyone who would like to testify who is opposed?
Mr. Mayor, no one signed up to testify who was opposed. So if anyone else is online who wanted to testify, raise your hand, please. And I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, it sounds like that everyone who wanted to speak has had an opportunity. At this time, I give the council an opportunity to ask any final questions before we close the public hearing of either staff or the applicants that we have here today. I guess they're not applicants, the business owners. Mr. Cox and Mr. Dick, how's that? I guess, I would invite you to, if you feel comfortable responding. I thought there was, particularly the grass comment, I thought was something that has been discussed a lot. And I thought, Mr. Cox, if you want to respond to that. I know that was a question of whether or not that grassy area east of the hotel would continue to be usable by the public as it has been in the past. And could you respond to that, please?
Yes, all of our envisioned uses and possible redevelopment layouts include the grassy strip in front that will be accessible to the public as it's drawn in the example on here. And if we do go 5 stories instead of 4, that grassy area should be expanded. To be perfectly forthcoming, I would imagine like the little grassy area where the giant tree is on the north, that would be on the far left. I could see that area being used as a wedding venue or something in the future. So likely where the giant tree is shown, to be perfectly honest, that I could see used for something to the hotel's benefit that might not be publicly accessible. But all of our designs and visions so far, every variant, is effectively this, with the grassy area out front, and we don't envision any restriction between the bike path out front to keep public off, or to make a change really the way we're using the lawn now to the way it will be in the future. Although I will say we do expect dramatically improved decks, which you see on the south end of the project to the far right, expanded decks for Trinities, and we would expect them to do even more of their paid and nonprofit events to spill out onto the lawn. So on the very extreme right or south end of the property, there probably will be a little bit more use of that as well. So a small loss of that to the public when those events happen. But that's the vision as we see it for the foreseeable future.
Okay. And I want to bring to the public's awareness that in our discussions with this previously, the idea did come up of whether Santa Ida would be willing to put a deed restriction with this swap that would secure that ability for the public to use that grassy area for, say, a 25-year window into the future. And I just want to ask you if there has been any, and at that time, Sandite has said that they would not feel comfortable putting any kind of deed restriction on the property. And I just want to ask you now if that has changed at all, or if that is still Sandite's position.
Our position is that we're open to that to discuss after the fact. We have a laundry list of wish list items that we would love to work with the city, whether it's our dumpsters on city property, snow on city property, any number of different items that city boat parking for our guests, a lot of things. So we would be happy to discuss trading a public easement out in front if that was a concern, or to where we could somehow trade something like that or whatever. To add that to this swap now could easily complicate the deal, and the value as assessed is without any deed restrictions. So it creates a problem of, okay, if there's a public easement there, then what is the offset for our benefit, for example? So that's the way I would address it.
Okay. Does council have any further questions? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could just respond on a couple of items that Ms. Holland brought up. Relative to the bicycle parking, we have heard that at a few of our prior considerations overall with the city beach design. And I would note both with the concept for city beach as well as the further preliminary engineered design for the boat launch and for the marina, we aren't at a point that it's gotten to a granular level where bicycle parking and bike racks have been considered, but certainly the intent on both fronts would be to be compliant with city codes. So those are the kinds of things that we go over with the developer and their architect as we're going through their pre-application and their final design. And we anticipate those discussions to begin here shortly. Also, Ms. Holland brought up another point which I actually hadn't addressed in this preliminary design, the revised preliminary design, and that is meeting boaters. So families who may be in the beach and have other family members or friends that have boats, they're out in the water, and that ability to come back and forth and kind of unload and load families. This revised design actually contemplates a float for transient boats that would accommodate that kind of loading and unloading activity that we currently can't accommodate that very well. It's right up here above my pen. It's shown right there as transient boat access. And the idea with that is it would allow for that loading, unloading, as well as access to boaters who might be out on the lake in the area to restrooms or other amenities that are there at City Beach. So that also is a good point, and we had not addressed that specifically in this updated design.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. All right, any other questions from council? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing. At this time, I invite council to deliberate, and I remind the council that no new information may be provided, and questions may be directed only to city staff during deliberation. The staff report includes suggested motions. Discussion. Anyone?
Just think of Mr. Mayor, it's a great opportunity to keep a very successful, popular restaurant there that helps the community a lot and many nonprofits. And it'd be sad to see all those opportunities go away. And I think it's a very reasonable swap given what we're getting out of it and hopefully for the future in the City Beach. So.
Looking for the safety of their, it's not necessarily separating user groups because we want people to get along, but to be able to have our boating population to have a good space and then families to have a good space. And really, Justin and Trinity is what is, I wouldn't necessarily say the frosting on the cake, but you really definitely seal the deal. This is to be able to have that vision for City Beach, as well as to have someone of you and your integrity and how you treat your employees and how you long-term vision the support of the community, that you impressed me. You made an impression on me.
And I think I did in one of my previous lifetimes, I did corporate meeting planning. And so that aspect is very exciting to me, for added economic vitality to our town. I mean, in my brain, I can already think of entities in Spokane who could use it, who I will call to talk about using it. I think it's a great opportunity because, again, we at the Chamber helped put together the first couple Coachella meeting summits that they had. And as a previous meeting planner, it truly was extremely difficult, without using any swear words, to accommodate all of those groups. It was very difficult. And as a previous meeting planner, I never would have brought people here. And so this is, I think it's a great opportunity for us. And hearing that really the use of the lawn won't change, I think that's great, because I know it's mostly utilized for general public, like 4th of July when the fireworks are going off. And so I appreciate that very much, because I know people were culturally, we get very tied up with the things that we've done traditionally. And so I think that's important to the public. I think it's fair. And we've been talking about this for what? We've been reading about it, trying to understand it. And so I think and I commend both of you. And Justin, I appreciate your words. And yeah.
Yeah, please.
Jennifer, is there feasibility to talking about the grass again right away, dumpsters and parking? Do you see that's something that the city would be able to negotiate?
I think we had made a list of kind of back and forth, what are some things in terms of long-term use, and also during redevelopment times, what are some things for either party that we would like to see happen. And I think it's fair to say we kept kind of a bulleted list. It was the advice of our legal counsel as well that we not start going down that path of incorporating all of that in, because what's before the council currently is a land exchange. But I do anticipate moving forward, you will see discussions come back to council on some of these other items, ultimately for council to make a decision on any other exchanges back and forth for use of portions of property, or easements for the public and that type of thing. And we have a history, the city has a history of doing that, and has had a lease with the Cox family for several decades, where we've been doing this type of collaboration for years.
Okay, so just to add to that, I think Trinity is always being there ultimately for the community, and I know there's great intent, and I know there's great intent on the Cox family. I just have to outright voice my concerns for that grassy piece and the use of it. Emotions are emotions, but business is business, and that's why we have lawyers and law. And so if it's not in writing, it's not in writing. I don't know that that is a reason to not go forward, in my opinion, but I'm inspired that once we get past this first hump, that we can then negotiate and make something that is more permanent and is in writing in agreement form.
Thank you. Councilman Darling, do you have a comment?
Absolutely. I think that this land swap is more than fair. The economic benefit to our community by bringing in a larger venue for meetings and temporary housing. I believe in all the benefits that it's going to help help work with the city beach and bringing in different groups. The boat launch, by putting from the public safety standard, to me is absolutely a no-brainer. Keeping the kids away from the boats and the boat trailers and the parking is brilliant. And I just want to thank staff and all the studies and time that was put into this, and the Cox family for being patient and coming together. And I hope this is approved tonight.
Well said.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Just had one more comment. As we do get further down the road into the granular pieces, as you say, I hope there still is some opportunity to not change the boat parking, but again, think about the amount of blacktop we're willing to have at the city beach. So that will be down the road for further discussions, but I think we need to think long and hard about that piece before we have engineering done on it.
Well said. And I'm not sure that this came up at in your presentation this time around, but I know that the council's heard this before, but I think it's important to reiterate for the public that, or to share with the public that this was really initiated not by Sand Ida, but by the city. When we were undergoing our Parks Master Plan process, it was on the advice of our consultant that suggested we reach out to Sand Ida and ask if they would be willing to negotiate this land swap, because our consultant recognized how beneficial this land swap would be for our own master plan for City Beach, and particularly segregating that boat launch area and adding the boat parking, the boat trailer parking, how beneficial that would be to the overall design, and particularly to public safety. And I think we all recognize how much of a problem that is from a safety standpoint. The current setup where the boat launch is all the way through the parking lot, and with the amount of bicycle and pedestrian traffic, young children, families, that where the existing multimodal path just kind of spills out there in front of the boat launch, it's literally a nightmare kind of situation. And every time I go down there, every day of the summer pretty much with my family, and I'm scared to walk through there with my young kids, like every time. So, and they're just now on bicycles for the first time and stuff. So it's really just kind of a harrowing situation. Not to mention how difficult it is for the boat launch, for the boaters to get in and out in the midst of this multimodal traffic, also while there's auto traffic that's trying to park and get out and all that too. So this land swap, I think more than anything else, it really cleans that up, and it makes the whole plan safe and the whole function of City Beach safe for all users. And that's a huge benefit. And another thing that comes to mind, I just think of in the summer months when the parking lot is full, and I really appreciate Mr. Hutchinson's comments, because I hear that feedback too from the public that, why do we need more blacktop when, it's only whatever, 12 or 14 weeks a year. But that's a really good point. These are the most vibrant 12 and 14 weeks of the year at Sandpoint, the most amount of economic activity. And it's the one time a year when we really all have the ability to use, as Justin put it, our greatest asset. And so we really want to maximize that opportunity as much as possible. And I think about, in the summer, we actually, this is an ongoing problem with our parking enforcement, law enforcement, and our crews that have to go down there and monitor, try and keep those 11 boat trailer parking spots that we have, try and keep those clear, because the parking fills up, and then there's no place for the boat trailers to park, and they're down there having to ticket people, every day in the summer. They're levying 10 parking tickets a day, and it's a nightmare for our police staff to have to deal with that, because and it creates all kinds of other problems because we don't accommodate it. And we don't accommodate it because it's not designed appropriately. We don't have the space for it. So this is great. It gives the flexibility. It creates a much safer environment, and I just see this as such a win-win. And And I also appreciate the point that was made that, when we do get down to that granular look at well, how much parking do we really actually need? And I would remind the council that coming soon, we will be conducting a parking study throughout the downtown core, and we will look at this area as well. And so I think we can do a pretty good job at narrowing down what our actual needs are in this area. And I think we can be careful not to overbuild, but to preserve as much of that grass and open space as we possibly can, because that, of course, is what people are really coming down here for.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Just one note to add to that hopefully as a part of that, we will look at a structure in our downtown for parking to see where we really have the need as it gets to granular level.
Yeah, great. Any other questions or comments from council? Going once, going twice. All right.
Mr.
With
Mayor,
that, yeah.
I can bring that motion up on the screen.
Thank you.
These are the suggested motions.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the proposed property swap after duly considering the public testimony along with the information that has been provided by city staff and with all the necessary steps having been taken under Chapter 14 of Title 50 Idaho Code. I move that it is in the city's best interest that 1.53 acres of real property owned by the city, commonly known as the lawn or grassy area on the east side of the Best Western or Edgewater Hotel that is located on the north side of Bridge Street adjacent to Sandpoint City Beach Park be offered for exchange for a parcel of land 1.89 acres in size, legally described as Bonner County Assessor Parcel RPS 0000233930A 23-57N-2W PT Tax 28 less Tax 29 RV Park 22 units on the south side of Bridge Street, adjacent to the west boundary of City Beach Park, which has been utilized as a recreational vehicle park and private marina, and that the City Council do all things necessary to exchange this property for real property and other consideration of equal value pursuant to the terms that have been negotiated and which shall be made a matter of public record.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Darling. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilwoman McAllister?
Yes.
Councilman Darling?
Yes.
Councilman Espero?
Yes.
Councilman Grove?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule?
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations. And as far, that is the first, I don't know that we, in my time here, I don't know that we've engaged in another public-private partnership. Anyone correct me, Kim?
Wow.
Didn't we do the one on the corner?
First Bridge and First.
Yeah.
Bridget first. Okay.
The Hound.
Well,
We're getting good
yeah.
at it.
Okay, so our second one, yeah. I guess before this year. Anyway, I think it's something to really, commend ourselves on, and I thank you both for your engagement in this process, and I'm really grateful to staff for bringing this forward and appreciate everyone's work. And I think this is a great model for how we can continue to work together and make better things happen for downtown business and for our citizens and for the city. So thank you.
Like one comment is speaking for Adrian and his integrity. If it wasn't for him and the Cox family, the Windbag Marina wouldn't be where it's at. I worked with him the last 15, 20 years on that. So that was another partnership a long time ago. So it just kind of speaks to, he can remove his business hat and be a citizen, what's best for our town. He and I have had that conversation a ton over the years. So I appreciate it, Adrian.
All right. Okay, the first item under new business is a proposed emergency declaration and approval of expenditures to fix city water main leak at Gooby Road affecting the BNSF railroad tracks. City Engineer Dan Taddock will provide a presentation for us. Are you there, Dan?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I believe we have one more item under
Oh,
old business,
I skipped
item
it. I'm sorry.
7C at the top of page 5 on your script.
All right. Dan's not there anyway. Okay, so we're going to have a final item under old business before we get to the new business, and that is the Little Sand Creek Watershed proposed use permit process. Infrastructure and Development Services, Amanda Wilson will provide a presentation and kick off this discussion. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is that up for everyone in chambers?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So this item and discussion this evening is a follow-up to a presentation that we provided at the prior November 4th City Council meeting, specifically regarding the watershed and a proposed code as well as an associated permit procedure and policy to go along with it. So in short, we continue to progress forward with the overall watershed management planning effort. And really tonight's purpose is to introduce this code and the policy. Given that it is a new code and not a revision to an existing code, we're providing the draft documents for your consideration over the next month, rather than providing them as typical the Friday before a city council meeting the following week. So there's a lot to digest and no action is being requested this evening. We intend, as is shown on the screen here, to come back to City Council with a proposed ordinance and the final policy for action on December 16th again. So in the meantime, I'm going to give a very brief overview of the documents that are being provided and really welcome and encourage City Council members as well as the public to feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions or suggestions on potential changes so that we can get those incorporated before that December 16th meeting. I'm really happy to meet with anyone one-on-one and take a deeper dive into this because I do feel that it deserves that level of review and attention. With that said, as well, on December 16th, we will be providing a draft watershed management plan. That portion will not be presented for action. It's just an introduction to it as well. And again, we'll come back in January requesting a decision for that. So the first document, I'm just going to give you a very quick scroll through. We're not going to go over every single word, is the proposed code. So again, it is a new proposed code. It would reside within Title VII and become a new Chapter 16 titled Watershed Protection and Access. So similar to as was presented on November 4th, we have the purpose, why do we need an additional code here to address the watershed? And really this serves as the foundation for both our policies and procedures going forward, as well as solidifying our ability to have those policies and the need to adopt a watershed management plan that provides for some of those best practices. So as is typical, we provide some definitions so that we're clear on the intent, including defining what a watershed is. That's a common question we get, as well as why it's important and what it potentially can impact, such as our waterworks. As a reminder, I know everyone on the City Council is well aware of this, but the general public may not be, which is that our watershed is one of our key surface water drinking sources, and it serves residents beyond the city limits and well into our adjacent region. So this code would provide the city jurisdiction. It would clarify that our jurisdiction is really for the property that we own within the watershed. There are other owners within the watershed, and this code is not intended to provide us jurisdiction in those areas. It highlights that we need to have a watershed management plan and what that would generally include. It talks a lot about what type of activities we would regulate. In other words, when is something, what activity would be triggered that we would want to take a deeper dive into? And then from there, what would we need to permit and what would that, and what would we not need to permit? So that's the next section there. This was, I think, an important piece to note, we're not, as some watersheds have done so, we are not necessarily saying that you need a permit to simply access an already authorized use of the watershed. So general public use and access of an already permitted activity, as long as that use is lawful, would be allowed without a permit. And then we go into details as far as which types of activities are really initiated by the city versus the private industry or the general public. We are proposing, as you'll see here, and there's a lot more details to this, but we would not entertain others requesting to construct roads or do mining. That's really not the intent of this application process. So then this is kind of the high level view of the permit application. It is not in the weeds, which is really in the policy and the procedures itself that I'll also show you tonight. But this again is that 10,000 foot view of what needs to be in the permit process. Gives us the authority to charge a permit fee. How would we handle any compliance issues, temporary suspensions of such a permit? If someone wanted to transfer a permit, what procedures would we have with that? And then really, how do we go about reviewing a permit application and who has the authority to approve it? Staff has taken a really close look at this and looked at other jurisdictions, and we are proposing that, as we discussed at our last meeting, that it's City Council that has the authority, not staff, to authorize uses within the watershed. And so staff would work with applicants on a presentation. We would post for a 30-day public comment period, followed by a public hearing, and then a request for a City Council decision, which would be final. This talks about what type of terms we would have in a permit. There are occasions, particularly with utility companies such as a fiber company wanting to come into our watershed, where we may require a performance bond to ensure that that work gets completed adequately, as well as any reporting requirements. If they have a spill, we need to know about it. And then that we have the right to inspect any work. Talks a little bit more about the public hearing process. Our ability to issue compliance orders. This will be further detailed in the management plan. It is an interesting subject, as Chief Kuhn will tell you as well. The city owned watershed is outside of city limits. So there's multiple jurisdictions at play, including the county, as well as the state, as well as the city. We briefly touch on penalties and legal action. Basically, we don't specify a penalty and we don't specify the legal action. Instead, it's rather general, because the type of violation, the type of penalty, and the legal actions associated with that really vary based upon the nature of a compliance issue. And so that's what this is highlighting. And we're continuing to refine some of these terms with our legal counsel. We'll have that further vetted for you by the December 16th meeting. And then I'm going to move really quickly over to the permit procedures. So this is again for review and future decision. It is in a format very similar to some of our other policies and procedures. It's providing a linkage to the city code and how this is applicable or where it's not applicable. It speaks to just generally, I'll highlight section 5 here, that we see permit applications coming in as categorized in 3 areas. The word on the screen actually says 4, but it's 3. I apologize for that typo. The first one is utilities. So that would be someone like an Intermax or a power line, et cetera. It basically includes construction and long-term maintenance. We also have recreation use that includes construction and long-term maintenance. Recreation use that doesn't include construction of something is more classified as a short duration activity, and that is more specific and applied in our event policy. And then when it comes down to the application, this is where we get into the weeds about, here's all the information we're asking you for as an applicant. Without being, the intent was to not be overly onus on the applicant, but to provide sufficient information. And one thing I really want to point out on this list that I think stands out in the code as well as in this application process is that Requested uses of the watershed, staff is proposing that use be a public benefit. That it's not for private industry per se. And so it's not to say a private entity couldn't come in and do a public benefit. Being public property, that's really the intent with this. So we ask them to describe to us how this is a public benefit. And then I will quickly go through the rest of this. Essentially, an applicant provides additional supporting documentation as they see best fit to convey their application. They pay an initial fee, and then they're welcome to have a pre-application meeting with staff. We take a first initial review of that application and basically issue a letter of intent that includes a list of any additional documentations or actions that they would need to undergo before we would be able to deem the application complete. And the purpose for that is, as we discussed previously, these applications and the permits and the terms that go with them are definitely not a one-size-fits-all. So we're really not in a position to say X, Y, and Z is required of all applicants when X, Y, and Z may not apply to all requests. So this process allows for an initial review by staff and then us to say, okay, we need you to do wetlands delineation in this area. Or if we're not concerned about wetlands in that area, then that wouldn't be necessary. If additional wetlands delineation or other actions would be necessary, that's the responsibility of the applicant. And then the city would do verification and inspections to ensure that they follow through with that. More of a quality control role. Timing really varies. So if you'll recall with the Intermax request to put fiber optics within the watershed to get to Schweitzer Mountain, the city at that time didn't have a permit process, but their impacts triggered other jurisdictional permits, such as an Army Corps of Engineers permit for construction, as well as a general construction permit to ensure erosion and sediment control issues were non-existent. That permit process is frankly quite extensive. And so prior to the city going forward with any approvals, we asked them to complete that permit process first. So depending on the nature of the request, again, the timing of this really is dependent upon the nature and what other permits may or may not be necessary. So once we have all of the information that we need, we provide the applicant with a notice of completeness. We post for a public comment period, as I mentioned previously, host a hearing, request city council decision, and then essentially this is linking back to the watershed management plan as far as terms and conditions. That management plan also links to other existing standards such as by the United States Forest Service or the Bureau of Land Management. And then here we've highlighted that staff really have, the city has a responsibility to ensure compliance throughout. So if someone tells us that they're going to do X, Y, and Z in the watershed, that they've really followed through with that. And so that's where the full closeout comes about with as-built documents and then the actual application of closing out the permit itself. So with that, I know that was a lot of information all at once. I just wanted to note that these documents will be posted on our news section on our main page of our website by tomorrow. So if you would like to download them and take a deep dive and read through them, again, I would really welcome your feedback on it. I'm certainly happy at this time to open it up to any questions that you may have.
Do you have any questions? All right, thank you for that presentation, Amanda.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone participating on Zoom that would like to comment on this matter? Madam Clerk?
I do not see anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Moving on. Again, the first item under new business is a proposed emergency declaration and approval of expenditures to fix the city water main leak at Gooby Road, affecting the BNSF railroad tracks. Is Dan Taddock with us? He is. All right. He'll give us a brief presentation. Thanks, Dan.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. The city was recently made aware of a water leak in the vicinity of the BNSF tracks off Gooby Road near the intersection with Great Northern. Location, the city maintains two parallel pipes. There's a 2-inch and a 1-inch. These pipes are both galvanized. They're approximately 80 years old, so they're beyond their service life. What that means is replacement, not repair, is the correct solution. Unfortunately, given the close proximity to the railroad tracks, excavation and replacement is not going to be a practical solution or possible given BNSF requirements. So that means that we have to replace by essentially horizontal drilling in a larger casing pipe that can then carry the new water main. We applied for the BNSF permitting, and we're in the final stages of developing the engineered plans. The preliminary estimate for this work is $500,000. The city's water fund balance is sufficient to cover this cost. Obviously, the concern is that if we don't address this in a timely manner, the pipes could fail, compromise the integrity of the railroad operations, and cut off service to existing customers. This emergency declaration that we're requesting would enable the mayor or city administrator to execute necessary contract documents in a expedited manner. That being said, unless conditions change significantly, like that line blows apart completely, it would be our intent to still solicit a minimum of 3 bids from qualified contractors that meet the BNSF fairly rigid permit requirements for contractors working within their right-of-way. I guess with that, I would turn it over, happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Dan, I have a question. That seems like a bit of an engineering feat to replace a water line under railroad tracks like that, particularly on short notice. Do we have contractors locally that are qualified for that kind of work, or would this be coming out of Spokane, the likely contractor?
Yeah, there are contractors. There's actually some in the area of Bonners Ferry. There's some in Coeur d'Alene area as well as Spokane. I think I've got a list of 5 or 6 contractors, probably a couple Spokane, a couple of Coeur d'Alene, at least one Bonners Ferry that I think are qualified and meet the BNSF, again, fairly rigid requirements in terms of insurance and capabilities and whatnot.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from council?
So for me, with being, this is a big one. This one was actually pretty interesting. The Google machine really helped out with some terms like CLSM, controlled low strength material. So with that, I'm curious as to how we're funding this. Like, what is the water fund? And I'm glad we have it so we can take care of this. But that's, again, as a new guy, sticker shock, that's a chunk of money. But again, glad we have it. I'm curious how we have it.
So it's built into our water rates. So this is both on our water side as well as on our sewer side. Our sewer fund and our water fund and our sewer business and water business, because that's really what they are. Those are separate business units within the city, and we've had discussions about doing a rate study. And so our rates for water users and sewer users, what they contemplate is what are the costs for maintenance and operations of the systems, what are planned projects, and it also provides for some contingency for projects like this. So when we report on our water fund and sewer fund in our financial reports, you'll see we always generally have a healthy balance in both of those, and it's to cover circumstances like this as well as anticipated projects in the future. Again, moving in this year, we are getting ready to issue an RFP for a consultant to conduct a new rate study looking at projects coming down the pipeline and making some determinations whether our rates that we have currently are correct and adequate, or they're not. So we'll be taking a deeper dive into this, but the short answer of it, it comes from restricted water fund reserves, sewer fund reserves. In this case, it'll be the water fund reserves.
So then along with that, since this is an 80-year-old galvanized pipe that is going to require very complex replacement of, and this, since this is an emergency, do we have any, like, what is our inventory of other 80-year-old galvanized pipes that could potentially be another emergency?
Dan, I'll hand it back to you. I can speak to the financials.
Sure. We have water leaks, I would say, on a fairly regular basis. Not most of them we're able to repair. We do have some aging infrastructure. Our draft water master plan that hopefully we're bringing to you guys fairly soon will better articulate that for you. We've got itemized inventory of what we're hoping to accomplish over the next 20 years. There's a fair number of old coal tar line steel pipes that are due for replacement. They're certainly beyond their service life. There's some cast iron in the system that's beyond its service life. But we just have to come up with a plan to methodically and intentionally replace the pipes when we think they need to be due, and of course have enough in the reserves as well, as Jennifer mentioned, to make sure that we can address these issues when they come up as well. The other thing I guess I'll just mention here that I didn't mention previously is our standard water main size is 8-inch. That's our rules and regulations dictate that. One thing we're doing here is actually at the recommendation of our water master plan, installing a 12-inch pipe, so a little larger casing for a little larger water main that will enable us to serve future customers to the west, building out into the ACI, which is also part of the water master plan vision, and building out a 12-inch grid that then the 8-inch smaller distribution system can be served from. So we're trying to be forward thinking in this and not come back in 2 years and have to go through this whole process again and install another pipe where we should have done it 12-inch in the first place.
That's great, Dan. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anyone participating from the public that would like to comment on this matter?
I do not see anyone, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for approval of the Gooby Road Water Main Leak Emergency Declaration and Expenditures Resolution.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Spurrow,
Yes.
Councilwoman Wool,
Yes.
Councilwoman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Darling,
Yes.
Councilman Grote.
Yes.
Motion passes. The final item on our agenda this evening is a proposed resolution for the council chambers audiovisual project. City Administrator Jennifer Stapleton will give us a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll actually just give kind of a quick overview and answer any questions. And there is Cheryl on the line, who's been actually handling this project for us. What is before you tonight is a resolution to enter into an agreement with a specialized audiovisual provider who has demonstrated experience working with governmental entities and council chambers. We had EVCO come out and do an assessment of all of our setup in here and all of our issues relative to audiovisual, not only the challenges and needs that we have with our new electronic environment, but we also asked them to consider the challenges that we've been facing in this room relative to how sound carries, how well people can hear, even from the point of where council and the mayor sit relative to the microphone. And we frequently hear from the audience about difficulty hearing conversations or individuals up at the dais. In addition, we've also had the need recently with our social distancing requirements and limited occupancy in this room, but it's actually been beyond that. We've had a lot of really weighty topics before the council and big important community decisions over the last few years that have brought in large crowds. And we have long been talking about how we can provide an opportunity for people who can't get into our limited space when those occasions occur to effectively participate in the council meetings. Right now, what we've had outside the doors is people on their cell phones and trying to get connection, trying to get it through our Wi-Fi. So what we also asked them to contemplate was screens outside of this room or on the fire side, as well as on the TV side, that we could accommodate overflow out in the lobby if we needed, and further continue it into our reception area into City Hall, where people could see and hear the meetings, what's going on in this room. We could accommodate overflow without having people having to stand outside in the parking lot. And so they gave us a comprehensive plan which addresses all of the audiovisual. It's a fairly significant cost, as you can see in their proposal. We have not done any significant updates to much of our sound system here for the last 8 to 10 years. And so we're using technology that's not current technology, and that's some of our issue as well. We also have engaged an architect to look at some of our remodeling needs here at City Hall. And that was one of our other projects in the budget. Between the architect is currently working with the audiovisual technician, and the plan actually in this room to better address not only our multiple meeting sizes, but our sound issues is actually to flip this room around so that the dais is sitting on the back wall instead of where it is currently, because a lot of our sound issues are relative to the design of our ceiling. So when we've got up at the dais, we've got the council and the mayor, you're presenting your sound. The sound is the issue that we have, basically a 2-story ceiling in the back and this low ceiling in the front. So at the recommendation of the sound engineers as well as the architect, it would be to also move the dais and turn around. So this design contemplates that. Our timeline on this is pretty tight because this is something that is eligible for funding under the CARES Act, and we need to have our CARES Act dollars allocated by December 10th. So all of the equipment that is included in the proposal and we had submitted in our budget for this year is approved by council, $150,000 for audiovisual improvements that would be CARES Act funded. We are in the process of getting the prior approval for that. So we would purchase all of the equipment now. We likely would not be looking at an install until January due to availability of the technicians, because they're doing a lot of city halls right now where they're having the same issues that we are. So one other note I would have is, in addition to providing the overflow in this building, we have had construction again downtown on First. I'm sure Joel's noticed that, and Councilman Espiro in the last few days. And that was a project in conjunction with Avista Utilities to bring the overhead power underground from Beaton Basil to Bridge Street. Avista was rerunning a gas line, and that was our fiber run for downtown, including over to Community Hall, so we can also accommodate meeting overflow and have connectivity between City Hall and council chambers, as well as Community Hall, if we need that moving forward. Cheryl, did I miss anything?
You did not miss anything. You covered it well. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
So my concern would be flipping all this is safety and security being taken into consideration, whereas we have a private access door for council right now. And just by way of the way the doors open into the council chambers, is that being considered? I would like that to be considered.
In fact, from a security standpoint, this side of the room is better because there actually is an exit door out of this on this end, as well as on the other end. And with where you sit up at the dais currently.
Oh, I'm good enough to get over the wall.
Yeah.
I don't worry about that.
So actually we have, and both of these entrances actually go through our hall, but both actually have outside entrances through them. So yes, we can better accommodate the council and ingress and egress. And another thing I would note with this too, is we've had a lot of talk about ADA accessibility and our need to improve ADA accessibility to our facilities. This audiovisual design will provide current technology so that if we have individuals in the audience who are hard of hearing, that we will have listening devices so they can appropriately hear the meetings, which is not our scenario right now. Furthermore, with this online, it will provide aided listening for people that need that as well, and connection through that equipment with upgraded technologies. And finally, relative to council members' access, if we ever were to have a future mayor or a council member who needed handicap accessibility to the dais, it doesn't exist, and we can't accommodate it in this current configuration. The only way that it could be accommodated is in the back end of the room without us doing a really long ramp that's running all the way down to police. It is not a practical design to keep the dais here and provide for that accessibility for any future, or it could be a commission member too. So we are not able to meet handicap accessibility to the dais itself.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, my mother-in-law just died. I have to go.
Oh,
Sorry to hear that. Okay. Is there anything else?
not unless there are any additional questions.
It's not really questions, just observations. So this is one of those really neat things as far as timing happens. I know that there's a lot of stuff going on, but I see this, and with what you're doing with this, it's timely because the upgrades were overdue tech-wise, as well as to support future. This has absolutely been a public request from the past couple council meetings that I've been to, and the letters that we've probably all received requesting more access, as well as the CARES dollars. This is the appropriate use of that. So, thank you.
There'll be access to the restroom.
Yes, there will be access. Yeah, actually, there's one right there. And it's handicap accessible.
There's all my needs.
Any other questions from council? Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on this issue?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution for an agreement with Outco Sound and Electronics Incorporated for the council chambers audiovisual project, which authorizes the mayor or city administrator to sign the agreement and other documents related to this project. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? This will be,
Just one more comment about orientation of doors and how they open directed at the dais, if it's going to go on the back. Orientations of the doors where the public is coming in.
So the public would still enter the room through the doors here, but rather than having this scenario where the public comes in right next to where we have the dais, they'd be coming in at the back of the room, which is more of a traditional setup. So
Okay, I'll just be blatant. I don't want to feel like a sitting duck. So to me, that door angled that way, you don't have to come in here to cause a problem. But with it angled this way, you actually have to come in here to cause a problem. And I only bring that up because, it's happened in the council chambers before in this country. And I'm not saying it's ever going to happen here, but I would like that to be taken into consideration.
Okay. One thing I would note with adding the TVs outside of the room. So when we look at this from a security standpoint, and our chief's probably off now. If we look at this from a security standpoint, when we've had to use police to kind of manage we're using them for crowd management for our meetings when we're in overflow and they're outside of the doors. They're not seeing what goes on here by, again, doing this project and getting the screens on the outside. Actually, now they have visibility into council chambers, which they currently don't have. In addition to that, for us throughout the day, with adding the screen that will be out in the lobby area too, because we're so disconnected from an office standpoint into what's happening here, and we do have the public come in, we have other users sometimes, and we have meetings in this room, and nobody has visibility of that. So that will give us the visibility actually in our offices for what's happening here, in addition to the public convenience of what's happening through the day. We're actually in 2 separate buildings here at City Hall. It very much feels that way, that there's what happens in the one building, there's the what happens in the other building. So this technology helps us kind of bridge that across our working areas. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Darling,
Yes.
Councilman Sparrow,
Yes.
Councilman Groot,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes and this meeting is adjourned.
Night, everybody.